So very good evening to our viewers and welcome to Channel 2's English News Bulletin. I'm Angie Meher joining you for the news, and we begin straight away with a look at the headlines. President Abdel-Fattah el-Sisi stresses the importance of full coordination among state agencies concerned with food security. President Abdel-Fattah el-Sisi says he values statements by U.S. President Trump saying they reflect keenness to resolve conflicts. Gaza mediators intensifying efforts to reach deal in Doha. Welcome back. Now the details in full. President Abdel-Fattah el-Sisi met with the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, the Minister of Supply and Internal Trade, Sharif Farouk, the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, Alauddin Farouk, today. During the meeting, President el-Sisi stressed the importance of full coordination among state agencies concerned with food security, ensuring harmony between these institutions and their implementation and alignment with state policies. President stressed the importance of determining the areas to be cultivated with strategic crops in the New Delta to increase self-sufficiency. The meeting also addressed efforts to improve agricultural lands and implement mechanization, as well as efforts to increase the productivity of red meat and dairy products. Presidential spokesperson also said the meeting emphasized the availability of strategic reserves of basic commodities, particularly wheat, sugar, oil, and meat. In this context, the meeting highlighted details of the contracts related to the purchase of strategic commodities, including that of 304 million tons of wheat, 192,000 tons of crude oil, and 4,000 tons of frozen poultry and 6,000 tons of frozen meat. President Abdel-Fattah el-Sisi said he values the statements by President Donald Trump, which demonstrate the seriousness of the United States in exerting efforts to resolve conflicts and end wars. Egypt reaffirms its confidence in President Trump's ability to address complex challenges and advance peace, stability, and security across the globe, whether in Ukraine, the Palestinian territory, or Africa. Also said Egypt appreciates President Trump's keenness on reaching a just agreement that safeguards the interests of all parties regarding the Ethiopian dam, as well as his recognition of the Nile as the source of life for Egypt. Egypt also reaffirms its support for President Trump's vision to establish just peace, security, and stability for all countries in the region and around the world. The Foreign Minister, Badr Abdelati, said Egypt is committed to boosting ties with the European Union across various fields. Abdelati was speaking during his participation in the 5th meeting of the EU Foreign Ministers plus Southern Neighbours Foreign Ministers in Brussels. In his address before the meeting, Abdelati hailed the commitment by the European Union to boost cooperation with southern Mediterranean countries. He said Cairo emphasizes boosting peace and security in the region through peaceful settlements in regional feuds in accordance with international law and UN resolutions. On the sidelines of the EU meeting in Brussels, the Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati also held talks with his Spanish counterpart, José Manuel Albares. The talks focused on boosting ties and the latest developments in the Middle East. Officials said both sides agreed on the need to end unrest in the region and boost peace and security efforts. They also said Abdelati hailed Spain's stance in support of international law and in support of the Palestinian issue. He also reviewed during his meeting efforts by Cairo to reach a ceasefire in Gaza, stressing the objection to the deportation of the Palestinians. Also, the Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati held talks on the sidelines of the EU meeting with Portugal's Foreign Minister Paulo Rangel. The talks discussed regional developments and bilateral ties. Officials said during the talks, Abdelati expressed his keenness on expanding ties in all fields, especially the implementation of the strategic partnership axis between Egypt and the European Union. Abdelati also reviewed efforts by Cairo to cooperate with Qatar and the US to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Gaza ceasefire talks remain in their first phase after more than a week of talks, even as mediators step up efforts to broker a truce between Israel and Hamas. Qatar said Tuesday discussions on the framework agreement are still ongoing as both delegations are present in Doha, and mediators are intensifying efforts to reach an agreement. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson told reporters that the negotiations are still in the first phase, which is specifically about reaching an agreement of principle ahead of the negotiations that will begin in the next phase. However, uncertainty loomed over the efforts, which had appeared deadlocked over the weekend, with each side accusing the other of staking out positions that prevented a deal from being reached. The United Nations Rights Office said today it had recorded at least 875 killings within the last 6 weeks at 8 points in Gaza that are run by the U.S. and the Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and convoys run by other relief groups, including the UN. Majority of those killed were in the vicinity of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites, whilst the remaining 201 were killed en route of other aid convoys. The European Union is seeking updates from Israel on the implementation of a new deal to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. According to Kaja Kallas, the bloc's foreign policy chief foreign ministers from the EU's 27 member nations are meeting today in Brussels in the wake of a new aid deal for Gaza, largely forged by Kallas and Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar. Saar met with EU leaders late Monday after agreeing last week to allow desperately needed food and fuel into the coastal enclave of 2.3 million people who've now endured more than 21 months of war. Meanwhile, there's been an increase in killings of and attacks against Palestinians by settlers and occupation security forces in the occupied West Bank in recent weeks. The United Nations Human Rights Office said today Israeli settlers and security forces have intensified their killings, attacks and harassment of the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in the past weeks. Spokesperson for the UN office have now been forcibly displaced in the north of the occupied West Bank since the Israeli occupation forces launched its Iron Wall operation. Spokesperson also highlighted that it is contributing to the ongoing consolidation of annexation of the West Bank in violation of international law. Israel launched strikes today against Syrian government forces in the Druze majority region of Sueda. Damascus had deployed troops to the area after clashes between Druze fighters and Bedouin tribes killed more than 100 people. Israel announced its strike shortly after Syria's defense minister declared a ceasefire in the city, with the government forces having entered the city early in the morning. The defense minister Israel Katz said that Israel's ongoing military strikes in Lebanon send a clear message to Hezbollah, accusing the group of seeking to rebuild its forces in violation of a ceasefire agreement. The Israeli military said earlier Tuesday it had begun striking targets belonging to Hezbollah's elite unit, the Radwan force, in the Bekaa region in eastern Lebanon. Lebanese health ministry said at least 6 people were injured in the Israeli strikes. Iran said it will hold talks with its main Asian partners, Russia and China, on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO summit on Tuesday, as Tehran looks for support following a 12-day air war with Israel last month. The Iranian foreign minister, meanwhile, said that Iran will have bilateral meetings with the Chinese foreign minister as well as with the Russian foreign minister. We have the details.
Iran said it will hold talks with its main Asian partners, Russia and China, on the sidelines of Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit on Tuesday, as Tehran looks for support following a 12-day air war with Israel last month. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a 10-nation Eurasian security and political grouping whose members include China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and Iran. Tianjin in northern China is hosting the 25th SCO Foreign Ministers meeting. In June, Israel and the United States launched strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, which they said were part of a nuclear program geared toward weaponization. Tehran denies having any such plans. Since the reimposition of American sanctions on Iran during the U.S. President Donald Trump's first term, Tehran was deepened ties with both Moscow through a 20-year strategic pact in Beijing, which buys as much as 90% of Iranian oil exports. The SCO is gradually opening up its place in the global arena, meaning it's gradually going beyond the regional arena, and it has many different issues on its agenda, including the economic, political, and security fields.
Russia said on Tuesday it needed time to respond to U.S. President Donald Trump's ultimatum to end the Ukraine war in the face of new sanctions, but it was ready for fresh talks with Kiev. This came as Trump gave Russia 50 days to strike a peace deal with Ukraine, voicing fresh frustration with Moscow, and laid out an agreement with NATO to supply Kiev with new military aid sponsored by the alliance's member countries. Kremlin spokesperson said President Trump's statement was serious and they needed time to analyze what was said in Washington. Trump warned that if no deal was concluded, he would slap very severe tariffs on Russia's trade partners in a bid to impede Moscow's ability to finance the war. Peace talks on ending the conflict, now in their fourth year, have stalled, but Peskov said Russia was still ready to negotiate and was waiting for proposals from the Ukrainian side on the timing of the third round of direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations. China condemned on Tuesday coercion by the United States after President Donald Trump threatened very severe tariffs against Moscow's remaining trade partners if it doesn't resolve its war in Ukraine within 50 days. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that China firmly opposes all illegal unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction, highlighting that there were no winners in a tariff war and coercion and pressure would not solve any problems. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Tuesday after meeting China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing that China and Australia will keep open dialogue and look for areas of cooperation despite strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific region. Xi said in remarks that China was willing to promote further development in the China-Australia relationship. Albanese's visit to China comes as Beijing tries to capitalize on U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping trade tariffs by presenting itself as a stable and reliable partner. Chinese state media, meanwhile, said Xi emphasized in the meeting that China and Australia should continue to enhance strategic mutual trust, create a favorable business environment for both sides, and safeguard multilateralism and free trade in the face of a complex international landscape. Back home, the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, said that the government gives great priority to the mechanizing of the government services to provide better and rapid service for citizens. This came in a report reviewed by the Prime Minister Madbouli as he met with the Minister of Transport and Information Technology, Amr Talat. The report also tackled services by the Real Estate Registration Authority through the post offices nationwide to facilitate the government services offered to citizens. Now moving to some business news, European Union countries are close to reaching an agreement on a new package of sanctions against Russia. The bloc's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said Tuesday that the bloc hopes to reach a political agreement on the 18th sanctions package. All the elements of the package have been agreed, although one member state still had a reservation about a proposed lower price cap on Russian oil. The European Commission, meanwhile, proposed the 18th package of sanctions against Russia for its war on Ukraine, aimed at Moscow's energy revenue, its banks, and its military industry. The new package proposes banning transactions with Russia's Nord Stream gas pipelines, as well as banks that engage in sanctions circumvention. China's economy expanded more than 5% in the second quarter, buoyed by strong exports. However, analysts warn that more work was needed to address the sluggish consumer demand. Figures offer good news for the country's leadership as it fights a multi-front battle to kickstart growth, a challenge made all the more difficult by Donald Trump's tariff war. The U.S. president has imposed tolls on China and most other major trading partners since returning to office in January, threatening Beijing's exports just as it becomes more reliant on them to stimulate economic activity. Now moving to the exciting world of sports, kicking off with Real Madrid's Croatia captain Luka Modric, who will join AC Milan after the Club World Cup. Serie A club's newly appointed manager, Massimiliano Allegri, confirmed late Monday. The move means that the 39-year-old midfielder, who announced in May he'd be leaving Madrid after the Club World Cup, will bring his 13-year spell at the Spanish Giants to a close. Real faced PSG in the Club World Cup, and with the final scheduled, Modric, the 2018 Ballon d'Or winner, will join Milan's side looking to bounce back from a disappointing campaign that saw them finish 8th and miss out on the European competition. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up the evening's English News Bulletin here on Channel 2. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Thank you for watching.